Raise the Roof Production.
Well, you'll never know the heartache of looking a grown man in the eye, and he asks, am I gonna make it? And you gotta lie. Well, they call me Doc, but I ain't got no degree. When shit hits the fan, they're calling for me. From bluegrass, Kentucky, with red blood on my hands, nobody calls me hero except for my friends. Yeah, they call me Doc.
Hello, brothers and sisters and American patriots. Welcome to another episode of Sick Call with Doc. I'm your host, Rod Doc Walbeck. Always your other host, Joe Misfit Glenn, Combat Army Medic. In the back, hitting the buttons, Brian Devil Dog Roof. And today is a very special honor for me. I take a lot of pride in being a hospital corpsman. And I have a hospital corpsman in front of us today. Please welcome to the show the host of the Female Veterans Podcast, a hospital corpsman, third-class petty officer, pharmacist mate, Kia Baker. Welcome to the show, lady. What's up?
Thank you for having me.
So fired up to have you today. You have so much knowledge, so much stuff you can impart on our fellow veterans and our sisters. And I'm just glad I got a notification about your podcast. And we talked, and here we are. Welcome, Doc. Thank you for your service.
Thanks, Doc. My pleasure.
So, today's your day. You can start from the start, wherever you want to start. You can end it wherever you want to end it. But today is your day to speak about you, your life that you wish to share, to relate to other veterans so that they can find hope in their day. Welcome to the show.
Outstanding. Go Navy.
Go Navy. So what do you want to do? What do you want to start?
Well, I guess I should start at the beginning, right? So I enlisted in high school. I was a sophomore, and I was thinking, okay, it's time for me to go to college. And I talked to my mom, and coming from a very poor household, she said, I don't know how you're going to go to college. And she said, but what I will tell you you're going to do is you're going to go to the military. And I was like, oh, I had no idea that I was going to do that. And she said, let me tell you why. And I knew that my mom had dreamt of going to the Army. But at about 36 years old, and when she was getting ready for boot camp, she got pregnant, and then she aged out. So she had given up her dream to go and serve, and she wanted me to fulfill that for her. And I knew it. And she was like, it will be a firm foundation for your life, and it will just set you up for the best future. And so I said, okay, fine. But I'm not going to the Army, because that's where she wanted me to go. And I said, I'm not going to the Army. I have an aunt who served in the Army and retired as well. And my older brother went to the Army, served 8 years in Korea. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to go do this, but I'm not going to the Army. I'm going to choose my own choice. So instead of taking the SATs, I took the ASVAB, and I scored well enough that I could pretty much do any job I wanted. So I talked to some recruiters. I chose the Navy and the Air Force after talking to a cousin that had been in the Air Force. And when I saw that Navy recruiter kicked back with his feet up on the desk, and he was like, sorry, I forgot my presentation. And I was like, what? And he was like, well, I'll tell you what, sit down, ask me anything you want to know about the Navy, and I'll answer your questions. And so, being a private school girl with a very structured schedule and lots of cleaning, I was on a farm. I grew up on a farm. And so I was so regimented. I thought the thing I wanted to do was have fun and see the world. So I was like, can I have fun and see the world? How much fun is the Navy? Like, tell me that. And he was like, oh, the Navy is the most fun branch of the military. And you're going to meet amazing people. You're going to see the world. You're going to make good money. Like, you're going to be setting up your future. Plus, there's the GI Bill, right? So the Montgomery GI Bill was the new thing. Yeah. And he was like, you can go to college, because I was like lamenting not having that college experience. And so he's like, nah, it's kind of like going to college. And I was just like, really? And he was like, yeah, you're going to have a great time. So I said, okay, well, I've got to see the Air Force recruiter, and then I'll make up my decision. So I went over to see the Air Force recruiter. He came like, I think the next week, and he was like pristine in his uniform. He gave me this glowing presentation about the Air Force. And I thought, wow, what an incredible, branch of the service. Right. And then I promptly enlisted in the Navy because I wanted to have fun. Okay. I wanted to have fun.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So, and I knew I was going to go. I did a delayed enlistment, obviously, because I was a junior by the time this was happening. And I finished out high school. I stayed home for about 6 months, and I opted to go to boot camp during the winter because I knew I was going to Great Lakes. Even though it was going to be cold, I thought the holidays, everyone's in a good mood. And it was a plan that worked. So let me tell you, I had an easier experience in boot camp because I chose to go through the holidays. And when I got to boot camp, it was, they were doing these like experimental companies where it was like half guys, half girls. So I got selected to do that, and I ended up as a corpsman, oddly enough, because I was really into fitness at that time in my life, and diet and fitness. And so my recruiter was like, you should work in the hospital. That's how and he was like, you've got the aptitude for it. You should just go do that. And I said, all right. And that is how I ended up a corpsman. It wasn't like I was like, I want to be a corpsman. I just was like, I don't know what I want to do. And he's like, well, you can do anything you want. And I declined ROTC. Like, that was also an option because I didn't want it. They told me I'd owe 12 years. And as a 17-year-old girl, I did the math. I'm like, I'll be in my 30s. I'll be like dead by the time I get out of the military. And that's literally how I felt, right? It's funny now because I'm like, so you're just a baby. But like for me at 17, I thought, oh my God, if I get out of the military and I'm after my 30s, all my life will be gone. So I decided to enlist and have, 5 years active, 3 years in active reserve. So I only owed 8. And so I said, I can do that. Fun. Yeah. 5 years of fun. And then I'm just in like a reserve just on hand. You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, that works for me. And so boot camp was interesting because they put me in this 900 company. So shout out to 908. And we had both a male and a female CC, which they were called then, right? They're called company commanders now, but they were company commanders when I went through. And I went through probably as one of the last companies that didn't have like all the stress stuff permitted. Like you could raise your hand if you were stressed out and stuff. That happened after me, which I thought was an abomination. Yeah. But it was crazy boot camp because I would see like grown men breaking down and crying, or like boys who were like 3 times my size that were like going to mental health to like try to get out of the military. So it was like a very strange thing for me, and I just thought it's really weird how I'm doing this and I'm seeing people fall apart in this environment. So it was interesting. We did get beat a lot, but I made some really good friends and I loved the classes. I thought I didn't realize I would be attending classes so much and learning all the naval history and all of that.
Yeah, we did that in boot every day.
I loved it. That was like my favorite part of boot camp. I struggled with swimming a little bit. Like I could swim. I'd been swimming most of my life, but the level of swimming they wanted us to have, like jumping off the side of a ship and like all of that was a little bit extra, but worth it. Cause obviously if you're not going to go down with the ship, you need to swim. Right. Mm-hmm. So I had to do a little extra work in swimming, but I made it through everything. I did a job. We were a house crew, so we didn't do like the whole full like service week. What we did was we held graduation. So we cleaned the drill hall, and we hosted all of the brass basically in a special room where I made Kool-Aid and served cake. And that was like my job during boot camp. And so after everyone was done with the boot camp graduation celebrations, right, we would eat cake and like drink Kool-Aid. And we thought we were the best, luckiest people in boot camp. And so after that, I went off to A school just up across the bridge.
Up the street.
Up the street, and went, and then it was like very different, because A school was like a culture shock in a different way, because suddenly we had freedom. So for Corpsman A school, immediately you did not have to wear your uniform all the time. So you got to go have civilian clothes. And then there was like this new luxury barracks, and it was so beautiful. And we got to live in this beautiful barracks. And then we would go to class, and our instructors were really amazing. And so I just, I immediately had friends and a boyfriend, and like life sort of kicked up for me, and it was very fun. Like I loved A school. A school was a great time. And in fact, I was a very mediocre student because I was having problems at home. And the one class, like the one test that I did the best on was pharmacy. And it shocked everybody, including myself. And that played a role later in my career. But at the time, I thought, wow, that was interesting. I can't believe I did so well on that. Everyone else did terrible on that part. So after that, I became staff at Great Lakes because no one wanted to be there. And I had two friends, and we had assessed like, okay, the chances of us staying together through this military experience is going to be pretty slim, unless we choose a base that no one really wants to be at, which is Great Lakes. They had just made it the only boot camp, and and it was like a training command. So the rules there were stricter. Like we couldn't drink at 18 there and stuff. We couldn't have, in fact, they changed it like right after I became staff. We couldn't even keep alcohol in our barracks rooms there. So no one wanted to be there. So we were like, we're going to pick this space, and then we'll maybe be there. And I think our one friend didn't do the thing, because two of us got there and she went to Camp Pendleton. So like, you're going to California?
That's a long way.
That's a long way. So, but we had fun. We had a really good time. And it was like you had to acclimate. Where I was, there were lots of women. So it wasn't like it was the mid 90s. We were just coming out of Desert Storm. People were coming back. So I'm technically a Desert Storm vet, but I didn't go over because people were starting to come back. So I was basically stateside, Shore Command, my entire career. And Bill Clinton was the president. So you may recall he decreased defense spending. Mm-hmm. And so they were like, once I was at Great Lakes, they were like every time, and like I think I had one option to move. And when that time came, they were like, nope, we need you here. This is where you're needed. This is where you're stay. So I had no option to go anywhere else. I wanted really badly to go on a ship. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get that. So I didn't know how I would feel about being on a ship, but I wanted the experience and I wanted to see more of the world. And instead, I saw a lot of Chicago. Mm-hmm. Wow. So yeah, it was crazy.
It's amazing sometimes how your intelligence will keep you sheltered, huh? I mean, because clearly you had a knack for the pharmacology that a lot of people don't. I mean, I don't know nothing about the pharmacology, so it's amazing how sometimes you can be held down with your abilities, you know. But
it's true. And I mean, I think the thing is too, I didn't start in the pharmacy. I ended there though. I started in medical records at Branch Medical Clinic 237.
Quad zero.
So I had the opportunity to work with a lot of the A school and C schoolers on the other side doing all the other jobs. And they would come through obviously our clinic because that's where they'd get seen. Mm-hmm. And I would do, I passed out medical records and I kept records and all of that. And then we had the opportunity to give these sort of seminars, and I would teach them about heat stroke and like how to, you know, when to go to medical and like all of these things that like, I think there was like 4 categories of lectures that I would give to these people, and I would do it like every week. And I was selected to do that, but little did I know that I would love that so much. And we got a new chief. So I had a master chief painter who I loved. I loved him so much. He was like a darling grandfather. And he would come into the medical records office every single day and tell a dirty joke. And he would have a mug full of something that must have been some sort of whiskey, bourbon, maybe. And he was the most darling person that like one of my favorite memories of my early days in the military. And he was such a lovely human being. He was like everybody's like, I don't know, grandfather. So it was awesome. And it is also where I learned to develop my sense of humor. And actually, as a female serving in the military, my sense of humor has always been a little bit deviant. So it served me well and actually got me out of a few situations that could have been hazardous, we'll say. So that's kind of how it went. And then I got a new chief. And at first, he was really cool. And then he sort of changed. And it became so noticeable that he had some sort of racial issues. And it was so noticeable that he was removed from the clinic. But during his duration there, he moved me from the pharmacy or from medical records into triage, where I was really unhappy. Everyone knew I didn't want to do that. Like, you know,
patient care.
Yeah. And I didn't want to do it. I did it. I saw patients for probably 6 months. I did it. Obviously, you don't have a choice, but I was so unhappy doing that I was like, I need to get out of this clinic because I'm miserable. And there were other things going on, and a lot of people were. It was like a dark time, kind of, until they removed him. And so there was this girl who was in the pharmacy, and she wanted out and I wanted in. And so basically we did a little switch. And by the time I went to the pharmacy, I already kind of had a reputation because so while I was staff, so my boyfriend transferred, he left, and I was single, and I had like this great group of guy friends. And they started going to these parties in Chicago because we were like underage. So it wasn't like we could go to the club. They started going to these sort of underground parties in Chicago. So I got invited to one on Halloween, and I went, and it was fun. Right. And so I started going to these parties. Well, these were raves, mid-90s, south side of Chicago, like underground. So I lived I lived kind of like a dual life, right? So I would be in uniform. And by the way, my uniform was my thing. If you're talking about shining some boots, if you're talking about pressing, stenciling, having your uniform top notch, that was like where my most pride came from. So like I would be in my uniform in the day, and then on the weekends you would find me in a feather boa with glitter lashes and like these fat jeans on, and we'd go down to these raves and go dance. I was kind of like a dancer. We would have dance battles and all of these fun things that we would be doing, but then we'd go back to the base and work. Okay, so by the time I got to the pharmacy, people started to know that we were doing this thing. Now, the other thing about raves is there's a lot of drugs there. So the assumption was that I was trouble. I was into stuff. And when I went into the pharmacy, I was really unwelcome there. Right? Like they didn't want me, you know?
Yeah, fine. How do you do?
Yeah. So it was tough. Like for the first it took me 6 months to win everybody over, but it was like a lot of work. Like I went into a hostile environment straight up. Like they did not want me. The Commander Hirsch, shout out to Commander Hirsch, was the most amazing leader. He was an incredible human being. God bless him wherever he is. Like he was just extraordinary, and he did. And then I had some lieutenants and a lieutenant commander that were in the pharmacy that were amazing as well. A little ensign that I adored not at first, but after a while. And because you know how ensigns are, but like it was an interesting experience going into the pharmacy in an environment where you're not wanted. And it was just reputation. It wasn't who I was. And in fact, when we would go to those parties, we took the Corpsman Oath. Yeah. So we would go to these underground parties, and we were like maybe 20 by then. And these kids were like in high school, 17, 18 years old, and we would help them. I can't tell you how much. I'm always like, I'm going to write a book about this, but I can't tell you how many car accidents we stopped for, how many, we helped a couple people who were ODing. We stopped domestic violence. We were down there doing, good work, we'll just say, and also having fun, because
Kia the rave doc.
So that's kind of like what was going on. And it did take me 6 months for them to warm up to me and to realize that I was really hard worker. I was great with pharmaceuticals, and I loved it. I really took to that job and enjoyed it. And I spent the rest of my career there. So it was amazing. The thing that happened, there were two like big things that happened in my career. And I think one of the biggest things that happened was I started getting sick after some immunizations. And then I just never got better. So I started to get like sort of strep throat. And then after I would get immunized, or I'd get some shots, and then I got mono. And then I got better from that. So I was sick in quarters a lot. And they needed to send somebody to gate guard. And since it was recruit surge, they opted to send me. I was not quite the favorite just yet. It took some time, but I did become the favorite. And I went to gate guard, and everyone knew I had mono. And of course, because I had this reputation, right, of this party girl who was into some stuff, but they couldn't catch me. And I did get drug tested every single time that they started drug testing.
Your number always came up.
It was always on. Like, surprise, your analysis. Yeah. Guess what, Baker? You're going to drug testing. What? Yeah. I was just on the last one and the last one and the last.
They go by the second from last digit of your social number.
Mm-hmm.
And mine's 5, so it's like every time 5 would
come. Every single time.
They always told us it's completely random. Yeah, yes, I was there every time, bro. Because I was from California, and so they knew, hey, you're gonna get tested.
Oh no,
I was the straightest dude ever, man. I never did any drugs. I didn't even mess with cannabis until I was 43 years old. And so,
they had 3 guys that were suspicious.
Oh yeah.
All 3 of those numbers would come up in a random draw.
Every time.
Yeah.
Not this time.
Random.
Every time. So, what that did was, okay, so let me back that up. So when I went to the other side of the base, I went to base security, right, to do gate guard. And my reputation preceded me yet again. So they put me on nights. And so I was doing guard duty at night with mono. Now, if you know what mono is, you can hardly stay awake. You can't. It was like being narcoleptic. I would literally just knock out wherever like it's standing there. I would just have to try to fight it all night long. And if you're not used to being on nights, your circadian rhythm is already getting jacked. Yeah. So it was really difficult. And one night I got off gate guard in the morning, went home, went to bed, did not wake up for 24 hours. So I missed gate guard. And they were going to string me up. There was like joy about it. They were like, yeah, we got her. Like, she's
Finally,
going to
yeah.
Captain's Mast. She's like, she's done. And I was like, oh my God. I went back to the pharmacy and I said, you guys knew I had mono and it's in my medical record. You got to help me. I don't want to go to Captain's Mast. Like, this is not right. And so I actually had a new lieutenant commander, and he went to bat for me. And I ended up not going to Captain's Mast, and they pulled me off gate guard, put me sick in quarters. I was in sick in quarters after that for like a month. Right? Like, because the doctor also said, yeah, she has mono. Why is she on gates? Like, anyway, so I shouldn't have even been at work, but I was still going to work. So anyway, that was like the first big thing that happened, that I was like, you know what? I'm in danger. Like, I don't feel quite safe. And in addition to all the drug testing and stuff. And so then I got better, and then I got mono again. And then if you know anything about mono, you only get it once normally,
Right.
But then I got it again.
It can recur?
So it can, in rare occasions. It's called Epstein-Barr virus, right? And it's
I know that.
recurrent,
I didn't know that. But I knew
so for me, it's a very rare that people will get it more than one time. Very rare. But I'm one of those people. So what happened after that is I continued to go to the underground parties. I continued to do my job in the pharmacy to the best of my ability. We'd have recruit surge. We'd have thousands of people. Like, it would be like all day, all night, just like pushing prescriptions out. Like, the pharmacy in the summer when recruit surge happens is insane. And a lot of people don't know, because when all the new recruits come in the summer, they start getting sick. So I worked in the hospital pharmacy, 1017, which is on recruit side, as well as the branch medical clinic. So I would rotate through all those pharmacies. And so I would help all of these people. They'd have to bring people from other commands to help us. It was so busy because we were the only training command at that time, only boot camp. So it was a lot of work. It was a lot of hard work. I was very dedicated to it. And how I blew off steam was going to these parties. So what eventually happened, though, was my friend, a good friend of mine, he was unfavored. We'll just say they didn't like him on the base. And he was the one who had been inviting me to these parties. I was going with him. And we had become friends because I actually testified for him and got him acquitted from some charges, because it was like a situation where we knew this guy. He went AWOL. Another friend of ours stole some pads from one of the clinics with a stamp for one of the doctors, so he could try to get out of being AWOL, right? So this guy, we knew him from these underground parties. He was on the other side of the base. He wasn't a corpsman. My friend was a corpsman. He worked with me in the clinic. And so he told me he was offered this guy, like, that they gave him his name, was this the person who gave you the pad? Right. And he said, yeah. But it was my friend. And there was another corpsman that I think what happened was, I knew these guys. I was on duty one day, back when I was still at the clinic, right? And they came through and they were like, hey, we stopped in to visit you. And I said, I can't have visitors. Like, I'm on duty. And they were like, okay. And they were like, kind of chatted with me for a second. I'm like, you guys got to go, I'm on duty. So they're going to come through to check, right? And you can't be here. So they left, right? And so I just simply testified that they could have taken it when they were in the clinic, because they left out the back door. I didn't walk them out, right? I just was like, you got to go out the back. So I testified for my friend because as far as I know, he hadn't given it to them. They could have taken it at that time, or the other corpsman that he hung out with could have taken it. And I think that's what happened. I think he took it from 1017 and, that's kind of how it happened. But because the powers that be did not like my friend, I thought he was trouble. He was kind of getting strung up. And so I went to bat for him, and everyone told me not to do it. Everybody said, stay out of it, Kia, like, don't get involved. But I'm like, it's not right. Right. So I did. I testified for him, and he got off of that thing. So then we went to go celebrate at another underground party, right? That he got off of this thing because it was like a year-long process.
Yeah.
So at that thing, there were these undercover police, and they, I guess, I don't know, he had this civilian girlfriend, and I don't know if she was into anything or what was going on, but we were just dancing, and then these cops were like taking him, and I was like looking like, what's going on? And I asked him, like, what's going on? And he was like, I don't know. So then they were like, take her too. And I was like, what? And so they, like, one of the cops grabbed me. They took us downstairs at this party. It was like a sting operation. And they had this backpack full of like drugs, and they were saying that it was his. And I was like, I had his backpack. That's not his backpack. But they were like, shut up, all of this. It was really aggressive. I got searched, felt up by this female cop. It was crazy. She took my money. And then because I had nothing, because I wasn't doing anything but dancing, they let me go. But he had to go to jail. They said it was his and everything. So we had to go to court again on the base. And I had to testify again that that I had his backpack, right? And that my friends were holding it when I got taken there. So it was pretty crazy. So what ended up happening is they found out that the cop was dirty, ironically.
Yeah.
The Chicago cop was dirty that was doing this. And so it ended up never going to trial on the base because of that coming out. So I didn't have to testify, but I was prepared to. And after that, like, I didn't have trouble in the pharmacy, but he had a lot of trouble. Like, they removed him from the clinic. He was a phlebotomist. They removed him from the clinic, and they made him do cleanup and all kinds of stuff like that. And then eventually he got administratively discharged. But before he did, he there was one other thing that happened. So one day, I was in the pharmacy, and some guy came up to me and said, hey, one of your friends, because we had this dance crew, so there's like a group of us, and we would have these dance battles. I don't know if you've ever seen that old MTV show like ABDC where they'd have dance crews battle each other. We were kind of like that. And so one of the guys from the crew was like, this guy wanted to know, like, was there any good parties coming up? And he said, go ask Kia. She'll know. Because I always did know where the good underground parties were. I mean, when you go to one, they would give you a bunch of flyers. And then I'd pick which one I wanted to go to next. It was usually a good party because some of them weren't good. And this guy came up, and he was like, do you know where the good parties are? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, okay, cool. So then he started to kind of stalk me. And he started asking me weird stuff, like, and I worked in the pharmacy, and he would ask me, hey, do you know where I can get any LSD? Do you know, this was prevalent, like LSD, ecstasy, all of those things were prevalent at that time at this underground parties, right? But you don't have to do them if you were there. There's also music and cool people, and it was fun. So you didn't have to be on that, but people would assume. And he started asking me, hey, do you think your friend John could get me some LSD? And I was like, no, I don't know. Like, no, but he wouldn't leave me alone. So I started to get really stressed out about it. And I was really good friends with the Admiral's daughter, actually. And I was telling her, she was at my apartment one day. I lived by then off base with some civilian girls. I think this is like maybe 4 years almost into my career. And I said, this guy is not leaving me alone. He keeps calling me at work, showing up at my job. I'm like, he's like stalking me and I don't know how to get rid of him. And she said, well, what's his name? And I told her, and she said, oh, that sounds really familiar to me. And so she called me later and she said, I can't tell you any information, but don't talk to that guy anymore. And I said, okay. She's like, he's bad news. Like, just don't talk to him anymore, you know? And I said, okay. So I did some digging on my own and found out he'd been in the brig. And so I was like, kind of got rid of him. My friends and I came up with sort of a plan to say, hey, to say, you know what, go and talk to another friend that's a civilian. I don't know anything. Like, maybe she can help you. That was kind of like the plan. And so he said, okay, you know, and then I didn't hear from him anymore. And I was like, great, that guy's finally left me alone. And so I went on about my merry business, and I was dealing with a lot of health issues by this time when I was in, and sick in quarters a lot. I definitely slowed down at going to those underground parties because of my health. I didn't have the energy anymore as much. And they actually were really great at helping me cope with the stress, you know, and they were fun. I will always say that.
I gotta tell you, Kia, first off, you did not get mono or strep off immunizations. It was off some nasty handrail at one of those raves you were at.
Maybe.
You never touch a handrail in your mouth. No one ever told you that, Doc?
Maybe. But, you know, I was pretty sanitary back then, Doc. I don't know.
The doorknobs ain't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's amazing how our history is intertwined. Because I left being an instructor at your school in 93. You were there when?
94. Well,
right.
Actually 95, because I finished boot camp in January of 95.
Okay. So within a year and a half's time, I had just left the school and you were there. So I'm going to assume it was quite about the same.
Yeah, I would think so.
You know, I was the E5, the assistant military advisor. You probably had a chief. You had a lieutenant.
I had, let's see. I had a petty officer 3rd class, an HM1, a chief, and I think a lieutenant.
Yeah, you had a 3rd class?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. When I went there, you had to be E5.
Petty Officer Arnold. He was amazing.
Tell you what, let's pick up now where you're almost out of service. Let's take a quick break because you have so much more on the medicinal side of things, from being a pharmacist, mate, and counting pills to like, So I want to get to that big time for our veterans. Let's take a quick break. Actually, make it a couple minutes, Brian. A couple good commercials. I'll be right back.
Hey y'all, Hot Rod Wally here. Finally, a revolutionary nutrient line that puts the needs of you and your plants first. Easy to use, forgiving, tweakable, versatile, and clean. Utopic Essential Nutrients blends only the most refined raw materials, the perfect blend of plant hormones derived from kelp, along with silica and humates, makes Utopic a powerhouse plant food. From commercial industrial growers down to our beloved hobbyists. Come discover our truth at www.utopicessentialnutrients.com. Come get them.
Join us for Hero Stock, a special event dedicated to honoring our veterans and first responders. Experience a day filled with incredible live music performed by those who served and protected our communities. Connect with our nonprofits dedicated to helping our heroes thrive. Discover the services available to support our veterans and first responders in their journey. Bring the whole family. Kids will love the fun activities designed just for them. Reconnect with your community and celebrate the courage and sacrifice of our heroes at Hero Stock. Join us for a day of music, support, and togetherness. Check us out today on www.herostock.org.
All right.
And we're back. Welcome back, everybody. So you walked the same hallways I walked, or passageways.
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah,
I walked.
Passageways.
I sure did.
You were in the same barracks that I used to inspect,
That is true.
right? And you
For
brought
sure.
up about your uniform, and I wanted to touch base on that a little bit.
Yeah.
My uniform was my armor. My shoes, I never wore patent leather. I always had my regular leather shine to where you could almost see your face in them. I never allowed my students to wear core frams or patent leathers. They had to use their leathers, and it was a big deal. Like, can we beat Penny Officer Walbeck's leathers? And they were all getting ready to go to field med school to go to Storm, and you were just right after. You were the tail end of that. When I was teaching there, they were going.
Wow.
So, like, you are intertwined. I didn't realize how intertwined our history is.
You know, it's funny. It was pharmacy or field med. Those were what I was looking at.
Field med in a heartbeat.
I know. Sometimes I'm like, why didn't I do field med? I would have loved that.
If I could take anything back, I'd fight for another shot to do that. But it wasn't in the cards. I got out in 93. You went in 94, 95. And I still have my picture. Because, when you get there, they take an official picture of you with your, I think Brian put it on our thing. Mr. Navy guy,
Yeah.
That was hanging on the bulkhead in the school. Every single instructor's picture at the time that they're there, they have a picture of them on this wall as part of the chain of command. And you got taught in the clinical rooms on how to draw blood, how to put in catheters. I used to set those clinics up for you guys to go through in school and stuff. Like, it's ridiculous for me.
I think my favorite thing to have learned at core school was how to dress a sucking chest wound. And I still remember, like, to this day.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny how I used to pass and fail people, and you were a Corpsman student there.
Yeah.
And to pick Great Lakes afterwards, why would you stay there?
I know, it's crazy, but you know what?
Know,
but I loved it. I loved going to the Helm. They changed it into a nightclub called Club Nitro. Yeah, I loved it. I had so much fun. I did one time. I'll tell you guys. See, as you can tell from my story, I was a little bit of a rebel. So while I was like really into my uniform,
you were my class, we would not got along, lady.
Well, when I was in A school, I wasn't like that. It didn't happen until I became staff, right? Until I was staff at the base. That was like the worst base. So I went into Chicago and explored and had fun. And it's a good thing I did, because that is where I learned about psychedelics and the McKenna brothers. And I started to like go down that path of understanding holistic health. And microdosing and macrodosing and all of that stuff. Because if I hadn't done that and gone into Chicago and met these like hippie kids and raver kids and all of that stuff, I wouldn't have been exposed to that other side of holistic medication, right? I mean, it did almost get me sent to the brig, okay? Because that guy was like part of NCIS. It turned out he had to get like 30 people in order to get out of the brig. And I was one of the people he was trying to like get. And fortunately, I had an interrogation with NCIS that sort of scared me straight. Like, it sort of scared me from going to any of those parties or anything like that again. In fact, it really changed my life. And fortunately, it was my sense of humor that got me out of that situation. But it is a crazy thing to hear your conversations played back to you and to realize you were being recorded. And
Right.
so, but fortunately I got through that. It was a very scary moment because I didn't know who these plainclothes men were, who were like, I literally got pulled out of the pharmacy. I got handcuffed. I got put in the back of a car and taken to a building that I thought was like just not in use. And I had a whole interrogation and everything. And they actually were really nice. I was really scared at first, but they ended up being nice. Once they realized that I was just some kid that went dancing and was at these places, and I explained it to them, right? And it ended up okay. But after that, it was such a scary, like stressful incident for me. I think it gave me PTSD. But that is when I started smoking weed. So I started smoking in the military. So before that, I was kind of a good girl. After that,
you were
know,
always hanging on the edge and not right.
Yeah, that might be true,
I'm
Doc.
calling you
I don't
out,
know.
Doc.
You might be on to me, Doc.
You were
Maybe a little bit.
teetering. You were on the teeter-totter. Whatever.
Yeah. I was a little bit of a wild girl, but imagine I'd been in private school most of my life. I mean, I was like a caged bird ready to just spring into action. But I always held it down. Like I was always above average in my service. So what I was doing on my free time, I felt was my business as long as I wasn't breaking any rules. And the biggest rule
laws,
or
laws,
right? And let's remember, I was helping kids, by the way. So it was a blessing for me to be in those circumstances sometimes because I took an oath that I took really seriously. And I helped a lot of people who might not, some of those people might have died if I wasn't there, if me and my crew of corpsmen weren't there. Right.
I could barely read our pledge without crying. I'm serious. The last couple of sentences are the ones that get me every time, bro. Every time.
It was serious to me. Like, I mean, I knew I wasn't a career girl. I knew I was going to do my stint and I was going to be out. But and everyone knew that about me. But while I was in, and I was dedicated to serving my country. And I will tell you to this day, nobody's blood bleeds bluer than mine. Okay. I am through and through like about that life. I am a very proud veteran, and to turn around and continue serving my veteran community, my female veteran community, is like my life's mission. It is like the best thing I get to do in my life.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like,
so you got out, right?
I did. I did.
Shit, and then you got out, and then how did you get to the Female Veterans Podcast? I know it's a long journey from there to this, but how did you get there?
Well, when I got out of the military, everybody thought I was going to be a pharmacist, right? But because, and this is my soapbox, I'm just going to be on it for 2 seconds, and I know you agree, Doc. Okay, but to come out of the military, and what I did was exactly the same as any pharmacist in the country, right? As a pharmacy tech in the United States Navy. But I would have had to go back to college for 4 years and get a degree in something I'd been doing for 3 years and knew inside and out. Why is it that I was government trained and I should have been able to take a national certification and work as a pharmacist straight out of the military, but I couldn't.
A pharmacist, correct? Yeah,
that's right. As a pharmacist, because in the Navy, you're a pharmacist. They call you a tech, but I counted narcotics. I mixed medications. I did every single thing that those pharmacists did.
Run the pharmacy, get rid of expired meds, all that shit.
Everything.
Really?
And so that is my soapbox. I'm like, my life trajectory would have been completely different if the civilian world would have recognized the invaluable training I received as part of the military. So it changed the trajectory of my life. I came out and I went into corporate America, which was like night and day. And I struggled. Within 3 years of leaving the military, I was nearly homeless. I had no idea. And I was a girl who always knew I was going to get out. but I had no idea how difficult the transition back to civilian life would be for me. And I didn't know anything. Like, I was so anti-establishment too at that point because of that little situation that happened with NCIS and me almost going to the brig. I felt like I was railroaded. So I felt like I can't trust the government. I can't trust anything. So I did not want to use government services. I did not want to use any of the benefits that were, I was like, I just want to put that behind me. Like, literally, I was so traumatized by that situation. I got married. I gained like 35 pounds. Like, I stopped going to all of those parties where I danced. Remember, I would dance for like 8 hours and just have fun with my friends. That's what it was about for me. But like, I stopped doing all of that. Right. So once I got out and my marriage fell apart, because I was like, 22 when I got married, right, in the Navy.
Oh, yeah.
He had been in the Navy too. And then we got out. And then within those 3 years, like, the marriage crumbled. I got laid off my job. It was like my landlord sold our building out from under us. And the new owners were like, you got weeks, like you got like 2 months to move out. And my husband and I, he was basically leaving me. And we were leaving each other. So I was like, I don't have anywhere to live. I don't have a job. What am I going to do? And fortunately, a friend of mine, a civilian friend of mine, was like, I work at this company. There's a lot of veterans there and they're hiring. You should apply here. So I went and applied there. I got the job on the spot. And I will say, in between that time, there were moments when I was married that I struggled to get work until I took being a veteran off of my resume, by the way. So there was a time period, this was before 9/11. So there was a little time period in there where being a veteran was not an important thing to be. It was not like this glorious thing, right? So I didn't understand why I wasn't getting hired. I was a girl who once I was around the base, I would get hired on the spot. Once I moved away from the base, I moved to Arizona for a year. I wasn't getting hired till I took that off my resume. And
mine was the opposite. Mine was the opposite. Every great job I ever got was because I was a vet. I served, and you have discipline, you're on time, you don't call out, and you work your ass off.
Yeah, you would think you have leadership skills. You're like, you keep yourself orderly, like, and it was just very difficult for me in corporate America too. But once I took that job, I was able to like get on my feet, right? And from there, because they did like veterans. So I was like, okay, great. And I was back in Chicago. So it was like easier for me. And so I started working. And then I was like, some years had gone by. I got on my feet and I was like, you know what? I am going to start learning. I had figured out how to use my GI Bill. And I was like, I want to start using my other benefits too. So I started learning how to get my benefits. And what would happen would be I would come across a veteran just in my passing, in my life, and they wouldn't know how to do something I had learned how to do. So I would help them. And then a few years later, social media came into play. Like, I think it was like MySpace or something. And I would come across veterans there and I would help them. And some of them would be like in dark places, like really suicidal and really, and I would it wasn't always I would be in their life forever, but I would come into their life, I felt like, for a time to just be like, listen, like, what's been helping me as a veteran overcome the difficulties has been connecting with other veterans. And so I would say, go and be of service to, like, especially if I met someone who was suicidal, and I would connect with them and I would stay in their life. And I would say, listen, the best thing you can do is go help veterans, go get in a veteran community. Like, you're not alone. You
get yourself out of your own head.
Exactly. You need support. Go be with other veterans. And I would and sometimes it might just be a couple messages back and forth, or it might be, oh, like, this is how you do a resume. Because I was really good at doing resumes. So I'm like, let me help you do your resume. Or it would be, and so it was like sort of like this grassroots, like, little thing that, I don't know, God, the universe, whatever, would bring people into my path and I would help them. And so flash forward, I had a family. and I had my kids, and I was out here on the West Coast, and I was deciding that I wanted to do something. I wanted to start speaking about female veterans issues because I saw actually on Twitter someone, I forget the organization that had posted it, but they posted this statistic that female veterans, the suicide rate was 250% higher than those of their civilian counterparts. And I thought 250%? That's staggering. And so I was talking to a business mentor friend that I had, and she was like, you should start doing something about, because I've never heard you more passionate than about female veterans. And so I said, okay. And I just thought, what am I going to do? And I said, I'm going to start speaking. So I took a speaking course online, and he had a podcasting course as well. So when I finished the speaking course, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do the podcasting course. And I'm going to create a podcast so that people can get to know me, so that I can have more of an impact in the female veteran community space. Because my business mentor and I, we were in California. And as I was talking to her about this statistic and everything, and she was like, you should do something for female veterans. We went to the vet center, and I think it's called Culver City. And we met this woman there, and my friend is such a doer. She's like, let's do something. Let's take food to female veterans out in the street today. Like, we're going to mobilize. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know how to do that. So let's go to the vet center and find out if there's somewhere we can go that we can really help have the most impact for veterans. So when we got there, she told us, I think her name was Sharon. She said, if you really want to have an impact for female veterans, give them a voice.
Damn.
And she said, it's nice that you want to give them food or whatever. That'll help them for one day, for one meal. She's like, but if you want to have a lasting impact for female veterans, give them a voice, because we don't get donations for female veterans. People don't really think of women as veterans still. And this was, I think, 2019. And she said, we don't get donations. So what we have to do is we either give them a blanket that they donate at the hospital, or they take the shoes, coats, and clothing of men that sometimes don't even fit them. And she said, they need someone to speak for them. Mm. And I said, okay. And that's how the Female Veterans Podcast was born.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And along that journey, right? So when I left the military, all of the Epstein-Barr virus things that I kept getting it over and over while I was serving, manifested itself as fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, chronic migraines, and a whole bunch of other little symptoms that go along with it: PTSD, anxiety, depression, all of that. So I got out of the military, and then I proceeded to spend my 30s sick, practically bedridden most of the time. I mean, I got my degrees, right? But I was really, really sick most of the time. I ended up having to quit working. I ended up having to, not having to be a stay-at-home mom, but it wasn't my goal. I wasn't going to choose that for my life, but it was what was best for me because I was too sick to work. Mm-hmm. And so it resulted in lots of weight gain, lots of depression, lots of anxiety, lots of struggles. And so when I moved to the West Coast, I felt like I was dying. I could feel it. I remember telling my VA doctor, after all the 10 years of doing everything they said at the VA, taking all the meds that they gave me, doing everything that they said by the book to the letter, right? And I was a pharmacy tech, so understanding the side effects of these meds. I actually took a med that had me suicidal. I nearly killed myself, and it was the medication. Mm-hmm. And so going through this process, I was like, I have to get off all of these meds or I'm going to die. And I drove 3,000 miles from Miami to Washington State going, if I don't change, I'm going to die. If I don't change, I'm going to die. And so this was part of my journey of doing a deep dive into alternative treatments and holistic healthcare, and trying to find ways to treat myself other than all of those pills so that I could actually live a life. Because I just spent my 30s, which you're really young, practically in bed. more than I wasn't. So I didn't want to live like that. I thought my life was taken away from me in a way, and I wanted it back. So I got here to Washington State. I picked Washington State because marijuana was recreationally legal. And I remembered as a young woman, when I started to smoke weed, I felt better. I was self-medicating. I just didn't know at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, weed is legal here. There's CBD, because I had a young child at the time. And I was like, I'm going to start with CBD and I'm going to see. So I was like a test subject for myself. Like, I'm going to make these changes and see what helps me. If it doesn't help me, I won't do it. But the CBD helped. THC helps more, but the CBD helped. and it started to change my life to where I could, so a diet changes helped, but because I wasn't in pain all the time, because pain comes with fibromyalgia, right? I could do more, and that gave me some hope. And so then I started going more down that path. And then I started thinking, well, if there's a lot of symptoms to fibromyalgia, and I said, marijuana helps with a lot of them. I'm like, but there are still some that I could use some support with. And I remembered how fond I was of the McKenna brothers back in the 90s and their work, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? I have a friend, my friend that that they ended up administratively putting out of the military. Well, he grew mushrooms here.
Nice.
And he lived here. So it's one of the reasons I came out this way. So I always had access to them, and I hadn't used them. And then one weekend, my ex-husband and I went away for a weekend, and I said, I want to try to microdose and see how it affects me. And the kids are away, they're taken care of, like they're good. We're going to be gone this whole weekend. I want to try it. And oh my God, the benefit. And I was just like, this is amazing. This is amazing. So much so that I have been, you can see on YouTube, I've been to the Psychedelic Society here in Portland to do a speech for veterans, right? To encourage the veteran community to learn, open your mind. There are things out here like ketamine infusion therapy can save your life. Full stop.
Seen it with your own eyes.
Microdosing.
Seen it with your own eyes.
I have podcasts about it.
Yeah.
I do podcasts about it, and I will interview female veterans who will share their full story about their experience. I think in my very first season of the Female Veterans Podcast, of a 2-part episode, I will never forget. She told me it was the first time she experienced joy in her life. It was powerful to hear. So then I interviewed a nurse, one of the co-founders of the ketamine infusion therapy clinic in South Florida. And she's a nurse, and she came on the show to talk about it. Actually, these episodes are on Citizen Green. I chose these as some of the first episodes that people would hear on that network, because it's so important that people understand that the stigma related to these holistic and alternative and cutting edge therapies have the potential to change your life in radical ways. And if you open your mind, it could be, maybe it's not you, maybe it's someone you love, maybe it's the veteran in your life, that your uncle, your aunt, your brother, your sister, someone, your husband, your wife is suffering, and maybe they're even like they have intrusive suicidal ideation and these thoughts. This is something that you cannot afford to turn away from, because it could save that person's life. I know
it's worthy of a check.
At least. And so that is a huge part of my platform, is the fact that number one, veterans should never go without their basic needs being met. Agreed. Never. And the way that veterans were treated before 9/11 in this country was not great. After 9/11, I love that people say thank you for your service. And then I could put being a veteran on my resume. I put it at the top, by the way. Right. And so I love that. I love thank you for your service, but I want to take a moment while I have people and I'm on your platform to say it's not enough. Go and support veteran businesses, please.
Mhm.
Go
Please.
buy from veterans, support their businesses, support our art, our podcasts, support our plays and our books. Go and support your local veterans. If you own something, give a veterans discount every day, not just Monday or
Every
Veterans
time.
Day or Memorial
Every time I
Day,
do.
every day.
That's
Because
right.
you know why? While you were doing whatever you were doing, we were property of the United States government. We all here know what it's like to be property of the United States government so that you don't have to know what it's like to be property. Okay. There were sacrifices made, whether we served during wartime or peacetime, to keep you safe, to protect your civil liberty. So we deserve better.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say about that.
We're humble.
That was my other soapbox.
But we deserve better. Yeah.
But still say thank you for your service because I love that.
Yeah. You know, I saw this meme on Facebook about there was a veteran at a store and this lady walked up to him and said, you know, you wear those hats to get attention.
Oh.
He said, yeah, not from you, from my brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't wear
That's
this
right.
hat for you. I wear it to find when I go to the grocery store, I look for veteran hats. Hey, brother. Hey, sister. What's up? You know, all the time, right?
I love it.
You never know you make a difference, right?
Right.
It's true.
Well, I do have to tell you, I had to teach pharmacy when I was an instructor at core school.
Yes.
And I got to do like the math part, how to count, those kind of things, because trying to memorize psilocybin, you know, and I could never get the right, I could never put the right emphasis on the right syllable. Yeah, I could never get the jargon of pharmaceuticals, you know. I always said them wrong all the time. Even though it had every letter in it, it was always wrong. I put the wrong. Yeah.
Like he was having a stroke there for a second, Doc.
What?
Sounded like he was having a stroke there for a minute. Whatever word you were trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, psilocybin, salicylic acid stuff. You know, I was never good at that piece. So it's funny how that was your thing, and I could hardly teach it. Like I didn't even try, you know.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. So that's funny. That's too funny. I wanted to ask you, the McKenna brothers.
Yeah.
I don't know that. For our listeners who don't know, who are the McKenna brothers?
Dennis and Terrence McKenna are pioneers in the psilocybin space. So starting back really in the 90s, their work is like really revolutionary. And I highly suggest you go and do research on them. You know, I believe Terrence passed away, but Dennis, I had the opportunity. So when I went to this online academy called London Real, it's where I coach now, by the way. And I learned podcasting there. And when I became a coach, I had cohorts of students that would come through. And I went to the graduation of my first cohort of students. And Brian Rose, who was once a famous YouTuber, but has been deplatformed for his beliefs about freedom of speech. Shout out to Brian Rose in London Real. He had done a documentary about his experiences with ayahuasca. You can see why we go so well together. Yeah. And he had Dennis come. And he was part of the whole, the documentary. And then they did a premiere in London and a Q&A. And I had a chance to meet him and talk to him for a second and take a photo with him. And it was like really an exciting experience, but he's so knowledgeable and proficient on this. And so I highly encourage you to go YouTube him, go find him, see like some of the work that they did that was pioneering in this space that has laid the groundwork for this becoming considered more medicine. It is plant medicine. Cannabis is plant medicine. So when I was self-medicating, I was intuitively doing something good for myself.
Yes.
That I didn't even realize. And that carries forward with the psilocybin now. Like, it's also plant medicine, and to use, like we talked about earlier, the herbs and all of these things that are of the earth that we have that can treat almost everything if we just know what to take, what to mix. Yeah. And so these things were part of my sort of like my coming back to life. I got off all of those medicines. And I'll tell you, I told my doctor too. And this was like the thing that did it for me. I said to her, I was at the VA in Miami, and I said, I feel so polluted inside. I was like practically in tears. And I'm like, I feel like if I take one more thing, I'm going to die. And her response to me was like, well, it's not like I get a kickback for prescribing you medications. And I thought,
you told me that. Yeah, I was like,
what a weird thing to say. Like, I'm definitely getting off of this. Like, no, I was like, I'm getting off of all of this. I'm done. I'm like, that's it. And so that's how I went down this road.
Let me ask you this. When you were in records, you got to do some teaching.
Yeah.
When you got out, you were doing some teaching of classes. And then, and now with the Female Veterans Podcast, teaching.
Yeah.
Isn't it great being an instructor? You've been an awesome Navy instructor for Corps School, bro.
You know what? I think you're right.
Done good. You'd have done good. Because it makes you feel alive being on the stick, right? All the eyeballs staring at you, and you're responsible to put stuff in their brain. I mean, like, you know, it's and Joe with his he does it with his growing videos. Loves teaching. It's therapeutic.
It is.
Amazing.
Like
and it also helps solidify your knowledge. You know, like for me, I can go read a bunch of stuff and I want to share it with you guys. The reason I want to share that is because, well, first off, I found it interesting. But second off, it's going to solidify it up here, because otherwise it's gone with the wind, man. I promise you.
I used to know every bone in the body, every ligament, every tendon name, every organ, man. Anatomy, that was my gig. I don't remember none of it no more.
No.
Radius and ulna, tib, fib. I know those. And Doc knows what I'm talking about.
You can go arm, man. Just, hey, you broke your arm, bro.
Your arm is broke.
Yeah.
Well,
all I'm saying is, do not ask me to put in an IV.
I'd do that again.
Hundreds of them.
I could do that again, easy. Yeah. It's so much.
I'd be so nervous now.
Muscle memory. I'm telling you, just muscle memory. I can make it happen.
I can stick a vein, yo.
Yeah.
Well, remember, I went to the medical records and then to the pharmacy, so I had very little experience putting IVs in.
Well, when I left records, I went to Iceland on a multi-unit ward. One ward, everything from deliveries to burns, surgery, orthopedics, all one unit, 15 beds for 3 years. And then from there, 1.5 years I was in the unit, and then I made E5 first time up. Want to say that kind of proudly. And then they made me the petty officer, leading petty officer of the emergency room. So I got so much hands-on care in 3 years. It was action-packed. From guys that got burned from the geysers in Iceland, their feet were all burned up, and you got to put them in the hot bath and give them morphine first, and then scrub their feet with brushes and pull all the skin off and stuff. They call me Doc.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Do you see? That's what I didn't want to do. That was like, no, right. I'll go to the pharmacy. Okay.
I love patient care. I love patient care.
I did too. I did. I really did too.
Let me ask you this. The last 2 weeks of corpsman school, did you have to go to the VA and work at the VA over there?
Yeah. Oh my God. That's like my best story. So, I had my little residency at the VA hospital on the senior ward. On the senior ward. Oh, okay. So I got to go be with all the seniors, and I actually pitched a fit. It was my one of my patients passed away, Mr. McNamee. I was so just sad. It was so heartbreaking.
Still remember his name, huh?
Yeah, of course, because he was nonverbal. And so I took over his care because I felt like the nurses were too rough, and he appreciated it. So when his family came, when he passed away, they came up to me and thanked me. and said, thank you so much for taking care of our father at the end, because the nurses were decent. So I pitched a fit. This is me being rebellious. I pitched a fit during that process because one of the seniors, Mr. Fadula, by the way, I also remember his name, was left in his wheelchair all night. And I said, this is an officer. Why is he and he told me. And I went to all of my core school instructors, and I pitched a fit about
they were
it.
like, oh,
and they were like, sorry, Baker. You're like, thanks for letting us know. Like, nothing's really going to happen.
They were treated like cattle. They were treated like cattle there.
Yeah, they were like, there's nothing.
The best care they ever got was Corpsman students.
That's right. And I made it my business. I made it my business. Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
Students were their best care they ever got.
Mm-hmm. So it meant something to me. That was an incredibly special part of my military experience, because from that point, I did as much as possible to take care of my patients. I had 4 patients that I took care of, and I bathed them, and I had an amputee, and I used to have to give them showers, like this little 19-year-old girl, giving him and moving him and doing all of that stuff. And it was a source of pride to take care of my veterans.
More so than counting pills, lady. You missed your calling.
Yeah.
You missed your calling.
Probably.
Hey, so let's take a minute. Let's talk about Citizen Green TV.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Roku for our listeners, for your listeners. Roku has a channel called Citizen Green TV, and we are all a part of that. And their mission is our mission, and our mission is their mission, to spread the word on holistic medicine, to spread the word for veterans. It's totally a veterans gig. And I urge all of your listeners, our listeners, to go check it all out on Citizen Green TV, on the Roku thing, and subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. Hit the buttons.
They have a free app. They have a free app for your phone. It's on YouTube. It's on all the platforms. Just look up Citizen Green or download the app. Like, I have the app on my phone that all you got to do is hit it, and everything is right there. Yeah, all free. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm so glad you're on today. I get to hang out with a fucking doc. It's so
Doc.
cool for me, dude. It is so cool for me. I so much appreciate this. And
I loved it.
And I didn't realize if I had another year, you might have been one of my students.
I might have been. How crazy would that have been? And then we could have met up again and done this podcast.
Well, the problem was I had a brand new baby girl. Mm-hmm. And it was time for me to re-up.
Yeah.
I had orders to independent duty corpsman school, which is an automatic master chief. I was a lifer dog, and I chickened out. And I got out. I was afraid that my family might not make it through that school. It was so hard. It's 2 years of PA school in 1 year. It's a massively crammed thing where you do, all night long studying 7 days a week.
Live it.
And I just didn't know if I could make it. I didn't want to fail. So instead of going for it, I just got this baby girl. I can't go to sea. I can't go out to sea. I can't leave this little thing.
Yeah. I bet she appreciated it, though.
Well, yeah, she was worth it. Absolutely.
Good dad.
Anything else? Anything else?
I got something. I wanted to say something to you, Kia. Look, all the stuff that I've been hearing from you, it's like I've just been kind of enthralled in your stories. Usually I'll speak a little bit more, but I figured I just needed to wait to the end. What I needed to tell you is that you're a pillar of light. I see you as a pillar of light. Now, hear me out. There's going to be a lot of people that are in their darkness, and guess who they can see the most? It's you. All right. And that's the kind of stuff that I like to think me and Rod do. We need to be these pillars for our communities. You happen to be doing a big one for the female veterans. And I appreciate it.
Right, bro.
That's something I can't do. They would hear from you way before they could hear from me. So continue to be that pillar of light, because people are looking for you. They need to be able to be shown the way. So anyway, keep up the great work.
Will do. I promise.
All right.
You know,
Awesome.
you know what the last little bit of the pledge says, right? I'll do all within my power to be an example of all that is honorable and good throughout my naval career. I love that. I will do all within my power to be an example of all that is honorable and good. And we fail all the time going to raves and shit, you know.
You would think that. You would think
went-
that.
I went to some questionable parties, so you're not alone.
You know what? The craziest party I went to, I will tell you right now, was a Navy house party where I saw a guy take a fish hook. I won't finish that story, but the craziest parties that I went to
Hanging a shield.
were our hotel parties and our house parties full of my fellow Navy shipmates. Okay. That those raves were tame compared to
Damn.
Yeah.
I imagine a Prince Albert might have been involved with that.
Mary Gorman.
Caught it.
Yeah, I was a very different single corpsman than a Mary Corman. Very different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, Doc, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for being
Thank
here.
you.
My
I'm gonna go check you out. You
All
can
our veterans.
subscribe and stuff. This should be a good time.
Yeah, for sure. The Female Veterans
Especially our
podcast is
female veterans.
for sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
They have really difficult stories sometimes, but we share the good, the bad, all of it. And there's really amazing stories. There's tons of episodes. There's like a whole library for people to check out on Citizen Green and anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm new to YouTube for the Female Veterans podcast, so that's happening now. And these women, they have big stories to share, and we only make up 25%, a little less than 25% of the military. So we have a very unique experience. So I want to thank you so much as a female representative for having me on your podcast to share my story and to promote my podcast so that people know that we're out here. You know, we're women, we serve, we're proud of it, and we are continuing to look for ways to serve like I do with my podcast.
Nice. That's awesome.
Much love, respect, Doc.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Another episode. Thank you so much for coming out, man.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.